So are you ready to shoot? Or we
I
go
am
over?
ready to shoot.
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. And you?
Very well. I watched your conversation with Mr. Les Brown.
Yes, yes. He's such a blessing to our world today. And one of the things I said, he is a legend and he's still alive. So it was just an honor to be with him.
That's really powerful. All right. We'll get started.
Yes.
I want to ask you a first question before I get into it. You were born in Bermuda.
Yes, I was born in Bermuda.
All right. What I want to ask is, you have a completely different, you live in the United States now.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, but you have a completely different flavor in ministry. It's rare. It's very unique. So I want to know whether it has anything to do with your growing up in Bermuda.
I think it has a lot to do with it. We bring our entire life to bear in ministry or business or whatever we're called to do and ordained by God to do. And our life adds the color and texture and perspective along with our revelation. And once you combine that, it brings the uniqueness in our delivery and the uniqueness to our message. It brings the perspective that you have, and it also brings a certain amount of compassion and empathy that you have with humanity and people, period. So how we look at life and how we view life and how we display our gifts and talents and how we approach life has a lot to do with our formative years. And I think that God uses everything about our lives. It all works together for good.
Okay. So we get to the questions now. The first one I'm going to ask you is Charisma News, the magazine, reports that you said in this time of worldwide chaos and crisis, God is looking for ethical kingdom leaders. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's a scripture that says we are the light of the world. We are city set on the hill that cannot be hid. And as light, we're not just talking about us being able to be used by God in a positive way, but also to bring the wisdom and the revelation and the insight. And to me, ethics has a lot to do with context, and our context is the Bible. And leadership is about having on your heart the best for the largest numbers of people that we could possibly touch and influence, and without being self-centered. We are driven by what God is driven by, and God is driven by people. And morality is one thing, and that's doing the right thing. Ethics is doing the right thing for the right reason. And our reason is because we really do want to see the unfolding of God's plan for all humanity. And to be able to touch as many people as we possibly can, to empower them to discover purpose, maximize potential, and also to know that they're very much a part of the unfolding of God's plan as well. So when I speak of ethical leadership, I'm talking about doing the right thing for the right reason.
All right. This conversation, I'm going to center it around creativity, innovation. All right.
Yes.
Particularly during this time. And I read something you tweeted, and I didn't know this. In 1891, during the Great Recession, the game of basketball was invented by a man named Dr. James Naismith. Naismith, a sports coach. So you ask the question, what will people create during this time of historical pandemic? And so, a lot of people are in despair. A lot of people are afraid about what might happen. So how do people move into that creative space? What
Yeah.
daily routines can they engage in to shift their mindset?
You know, a lot of people are praying about the coronavirus, and that's fine. But when you look at history during critical moments of crises and these inflection points, there always arises someone who is used by God to push humanity forward. And I can think about Joseph. I could think about Daniel. I could think about Esther. I could think about Deborah. These people were birthed out of some of the greatest pain points within their personal lives, within their community, within their nation. Take Esther, for instance. Her claim to fame was a beauty contest, and she was married to the greatest influencer of that time when Persia was a superpower like the United States of America is. And we can look at the wombs of the Spirit as indicators to what God is doing. And earth is a womb. The Bible said the whole earth is groaning, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of man. Mordecai became a midwife for Esther, and he was able to prophetically say that Esther, you know, the womb of the Spirit now has reached a critical moment where God has appointed you to be birthed out as one of the influencers that will reverse a diabolical decree that will eradicate the Jews. And she had to believe, and he had to believe as well. And what we need right now is not just commentators. We need prophetic midwives who are able, like the sons of Issachar, to be able to discern the time and the season that we're in, and to advise Israel right now, to advise the church, the body of believers, what they ought to do, and to be able to identify who the next are, and then being used by God to birth those individuals out and to nurture those individuals out. Our time is similar to the days of Noah, and even the book of Matthew indicates that our days will be like that. And the question, you know, remains, what did Noah do during his day? Well, the Bible said that people were going on with their lives, but he pressed his ear to the lips of God, and by faith received a download from God to build something that did not exist, and that was to build this ship, the ark. There was no shipbuilder in his family. There was none in his community. And so that means that Noah was an innovator. And during critical moments and crisis moments in any nation in the world, this is heaven wheeling us into a kind of delivery room, a maternity room, to show us that it's time for us to birth out our gifts, to maximize our potential. And we're men and women of faith, but faith is an action word. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's attached to an assignment, attached to a purpose, attached to a burden. And what we don't need more commentators. We need those that are innovators and creators. And usually the people that move humanity forward is, again, during the toughest moments in our history. And, you know, you see a lot of theories and conspiracy theories that are creating fear. But faith does not create fear. It pushes us into places and positions we would not normally go, or even want to go, or think about going. It pushes us into that position where we can be greatly used by God, not, number one, to advance his agenda within a specific generation. And then number two, not only to advance his agenda, to advance his agenda in a generation, but also it gives rise to us going back on the inside and exploring what God has placed as potential. Potential is God's gift to us. Maximizing our potential is our gift to God, but also our gift to humanity. So going back to the example of Noah, Noah had to do something. If not, he would have been swept away by the current of change. And there was a kind of reset where God used him to introduce new technologies. He would become a map maker. He would become a vintner. He would become not only a ship builder, but he would reset industries. And in the body of Christ, we have had enough preaching about gifts and talents and God using us. We have prayed, we have decreed, we have declared. Now the world is standing, begging for individuals that will lead and bring industry-specific breakthroughs. We need medical breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs. We're moving into nanotech, biotech. We're moving into fintech, neurotech. And where are the kingdom technicians? Where are the kingdom doctors and the kingdom scientists? And it's one thing for us to say that we're praying, but what if God wants you to be the answer to the prayer? Are we prepared? Do we have the capacity? Where do we go to be skilled, to be equipped, to be empowered? And that's why I have the highest regard for you, Dr. Poju, and what you are doing to advance the kingdom, to talk about these issues of giftings and moving the kingdom forward. I've been with you 2 years in a row, and what God has given you is very relevant for our time. And I can't thank you enough for introducing to the vast majority of people that you influence that you have to be a doer of the word and not just a hearer only.
All right. You said something I'm going to ask you later on because I've written the question down and you touched on it. I'm going to ask what type of prayer should a believer be offering up now? But let me just ask this first of all. And I'm going somewhere with this question. You said this from your writings that living a better life requires 3 steps: to think better thoughts, to speak better words, and to hang with better people. So can you elaborate on that, particularly in this season?
Yes, speak better words. I wrote a book, Commanding Your Morning.
Yeah.
And it was really by revelation and the power of the spoken words. Thoughts are things, and thoughts are the primary conduit to the secondary conduit that we call speech. And if you go back to the book of Genesis, it sets the prophetic precedence for us to understand the power of the spoken word. God said, God said, God said. And then in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, it says that God finished his work. So what work did he do? You go back to the 1st chapter to see that he worked his words. Scripture says, thou shalt decree a thing and it shall be established. The question I always ask people is, what is driving your words? Are your words driven by fear or faith? And if it's faith, faith in what? Faith in who? You have to have faith in God, but also faith in who God has called you to be. There's 2 dimensions that are here. Faith in God, faith in his word, but faith in who God made you to be. And for many of us, especially those that are called to lead and to lead change, it means that we have to have the courage to allow God to speak to us, but not be controlled by the dominant culture. Because you cannot lead change if you're not prepared to be an agent of change. And change, the scripture says, behold, I do a new thing. So new means new. It means that it's never been here before. It means you have no reference point. It means that your resume is not necessary. So if your resume is not necessary, how do you get the skill? How do you get the impetus, the empowerment? And that comes from God. And so I realize that my life is a journey. And so I not only am a preacher, but I'm a businesswoman as well. And the reason why I'm a businesswoman is because I wanted to contribute positively to the unemployment that we were experiencing in the world. And so my staff are staff from as far away as Sierra Leone, Bermuda, England. My staff are from all over the United States of America, because I didn't just want to talk about the power of a seed. I wanted to demonstrate how to plant a seed and the fields that you could plant it in. So I selected the field. I can't just empower a person and tell them, okay, you've got to invest and not be an investor. You got to be a business owner and not be a business owner. So to be able to live the word that I preached was tantamount to me preaching the gospel. I wanted to be proof positive. And growing up in poverty, and a lot of people talk about, poverty. But being able to see that the words that I spoke, the words that I was ingesting, not just the words that I was speaking, the words that I was ingesting, and the source that I was ingesting it from. So this brings me to relationships. You rise as high as the dominant relationships you're involved in. You live as successful as the dominant relationships you are involved in. Me being connected to you is not just about me speaking on your platform. It's about being deliberate about who I connect to in this season, because you are affecting my life, and my life is going to reflect the influence of the 6 people that are closest to me, the 6 people that I allow to speak into my life or that I'm listening to. So as long as I am listening to just CNN, ABC, Fox News, they are going to tell me facts. But the Bible said you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So we're talking about living the life of freedom and living the life of liberty. And these are things that we can control. We cannot control dominant cultures. We cannot control what another person does. We cannot control what government does or doesn't. We cannot even control the activity of a virus that threatens to wipe out large numbers of people. But what we can control what we think. We can control what we speak. We can control who we identify with. These are the things that we can control, and we don't need to knee-jerk. We can be deliberate about it. And the Bible gives us principles for forming relationships. Poor communications corrupt manners. So that means if you have people around you that are speaking negatively, that are not speaking positively, that doesn't have the ability to speak into your potential, to see what you're carrying, to give you tools, you're surrounded by the wrong people. And as adults, we can act with deliberation based on the revelation that God gives us concerning our purpose. So what we say, what we think, and who we're with are things that we can control. And if you're around, if you're surrounded by people that don't have the capacity for you, that's why books are written. Books are written. And then we could stop using social media for entertainment, and we could start using it for education. A book changed my life. Reading a book, the Bible. Reading books on the great leaders, Nelson Mandela, Kwame from out of Ghana. These great men that moved our world, Martin Luther King, Stephen Jobs, reading their lives, reading their history, looking at revolution, the Night Runners of Bengal from out of India, Brazil, reading these great minds affected me when I was in poverty. So I began to speak, and then I began to act on a prompting, a burden. God uses our brain like a writer uses paper, and he downloads his will on our minds, and it's uploaded like a spark of inspiration. And if you learn how to read the Bible, you will learn how to navigate your thoughts, the terrain of your brain. The wealthiest place in the world is the human mind. And if we give this over to God to be influenced, and then we allow the Holy Spirit to empower us. And then we submit to men and women of God that have the proof, like you, Dr. Poju, that have the proof of what they're speaking about. Then we're going to begin to see a new company of believers being raised up by God who are not afraid to put what they're praying about on a Saturday and Sunday to work, or Monday to Friday. God places you in a field. You should not be afraid to dominate. Whether you're an employee, and I call it an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, because I've discovered that not everybody is called to own their own businesses, but we're all called to work God's business. And so those that are hired, you should work on your job as if that was your business. Because if you're hired to be there, you're hired as a solution carrier and a problem solver. And there are some people that run out to start their own business. Quite frankly, they should be an intrapreneur, working on someone else's vision, because you don't have the same overhead. You don't have to go to bed at night and worry about how you're paying bills, but still bring to bear your gifts and talents. And I'll give you two examples. One is Joseph. He did not start his own business. Another one is Daniel. He was there with 5 kings, and never once did he start his own business, but God used him. You have Deborah that was hired by Israel army to become the first female legal advisor. And so we need people who understand that employment is also a platform for you to display your gifts and your talents.
All right. Okay. Let me just ask this.
Yes.
You mentioned 3 books when you were speaking with Mr. Dr. Les Brown.
Yes.
Some of those books, I've never heard of them. What were those books again you mentioned?
Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl.
That influenced you.
Yes.
Yeah?
Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. A brilliant book of how one man, during the concentration camp in Germany, in Auschwitz, Germany, how he used mind over matter, literally, to defy the odds. And it tells the story of the positive effect and how our thoughts actually do influence our destiny. As a man thinketh, so is he. So that's the first one. Isaacson, he wrote the book on Stephen Jobs. And Augmentino, he was a man that wanted to commit suicide. And he ended up being one of the most profound authors. And I can go on and on with books, but those are my 3 favorite books in the whole world. And then there are 4 other favorite books. One is Commanding Your Morning. The second one is Hello Tomorrow. The third one is Goodbye Yesterday. And the fourth one, we're reading it right now. It's called Prevail, The Prospering Power of Problems. And it's a fantastic book written by someone that I know personally. Her name is Cindy Trimm.
All right then. Now,
this is going to shake just a little bit. I'm just going to move this over ever so slightly so I can plug up my phone, because it's telling me that I'm running out of juice. So excuse me, it's going to be a little shaky for a while, but we are doing life with everybody. So I ask you to excuse me just momentarily. There we go, while I get the juice. And I'm hoping that it's not going to be as shaky as I made it. I'm going to hold it myself.
You're going to hold it?
Yeah, I'm just going to hold it for now because, I have it plugged up, but It's attached to my laptop.
All right. Next question. These are your words. Your perception of reality is the sum of words and thoughts emanating from your mind.
Yes.
Your purpose increases the likelihood of manifestation and the same likeness and form. This suggests we change our focus. How do I, so here's the question, do that when I seemed trapped in the pain of the past or the pressing need of the moment? How am I able to
Yeah,
change?
yeah. Life is what we all do. And it's my philosophy that we're all winging it. Some get to wing it way ahead of us. So perception is reality. And you look at the resurrection story of Jesus Christ. And you have
Yeah.
Mary going to the grave first. And she looked at the facts and she began to cry because she believed a rumor. And if you read scripture, you can see that there were some very wealthy people in the political arena that pooled their resources to spread a rumor that Jesus' body had been stolen by his disciples. So when Mary sees the body, the grave that was empty, she repeats what she had heard, that they had removed his body. So that's the first thing that we will do. We would allow prevailing culture to determine our perception of reality. The second is Peter. Peter runs in, and the scripture said he saw the same facts. But this word is not the Greek word that is used for Mary. The Greek word that's used for Mary is blepo, to see and come to a conclusion without further exploration. This word is theoreo. It means to see and form a theory, and then come to a conclusion. And this is where you get conspiracy theories. The third one in the resurrection story is John going in. And the Bible said he saw and he believed. This is a different Greek word. It is not blepo. It is not theoreo, but is to see with the eyes and connect the dots with truth. So we have to connect the dots with something that Jesus said earlier, that if you destroy this temple, in 3 days I'm going to build it. And all of a sudden it began to make sense. And so perception is connecting dots. So you're either going to connect the dots with the prevailing rumors or the prevailing culture or what you grew up with, people telling you that you can't do this, you can't do that. It's like Jabez, his mother really set him up for failure when she said, your name is Jabez, means you're a pain. And so everyone that called his name was branding him. Your pain. But he began to pray and say, God, I can't live this life. Give me a vision larger than myself. Enlarge my territory. Let me think beyond the box that has been created for me. And God honored that. And God will honor your prayer. And then the next was John. He didn't connect the dots based on the prevailing rumors and what people thought about Jesus and about the disciples, nor did he listen to conspiracy theories. And there's a lot that's going around. But instead, he connected the dots with the word that Jesus had spoken. And as a result, he concluded that indeed what God has spoken, what Jesus has spoken, is truth. And he believed. So we're going to believe in something. And we might as well believe in what God has said about us and who we are, and to find out our identity and live true identity. And I know there's a lot of people that preach, know who you are, you're the head and not the tail, you're first and not last, you're the light of the world. But what does that mean? Being the head means that you're a leader. You're first means that you're a creator, an innovator. You're first to market. You're the light of the world, means that you bring vision. You're the salt of the earth, means that you're an ethical, moral leader. So it's not enough for us just to read the word of God. We need the revelation. We need to go just a little deeper. And then we need application. How are you applying this word to your life? And how are you walking it? Perception becomes your reality. It doesn't become mine. It becomes yours. How you see yourself in this world is how the world is going to look at you. It's how you're going to behave. And if you can see yourself from God's perspective, from God's vantage point, you will get enough courage, enough faith. You will understand that it's not about skill, but it's about will. You can understand that even if you don't have the natural gifts, you have the Holy Spirit that will give you the gifts of the Spirit. So what you lack naturally, God will give it to you supernaturally. And it's all based on your perception of yourself in the world, and your perception of who God is in your life, and the role and the significance that you are playing in the unfolding of God's plan for humanity. Not just for the great people we read about and our mentors and our coaches, but for all of us. All of us play a role, straight down to individuals that struggle with mental challenges and physical challenges. You can read in history how God is using even people that can't think for themselves are being used. All of us have a purpose, every individual. And if God has a purpose for a cockroach and the poop of the cockroach, then you can be assured that he has a purpose for you.
All right. Let's get into more real life issues here. Now, a lady sent this in. She said, you speak about the importance of having a vision. And today you are a sought after empowerment specialist and transformational leader. But 25 or 30 years ago, could you specifically describe your vision for yourself as what you are doing today? And then she says, what will your guidance be to a middle-aged person today who is trying to craft his or her vision for the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question to ask. 20 years ago, my answer would have been different. But today, yes, when I was young and living in abject poverty, I had an inner sense, a feeling, and I was too young to be able to articulate it because I didn't have the intellectual building blocks nor the spiritual maturity to really understand what that was. But it was purpose, and it was demanding that I pay attention. And that's what I was chasing. I was chasing this dream. And it shows up. It shows up as an inner prompting. And the way that I knew when I was young that I was born to do what I was doing, number one, I talked a lot. And if you read on all of my report cards, it said, Cindy talks too much. So there were indicators that were there. When I was 7 years old, I remember being in an English class, and it was one of the teachers that everybody was afraid of except me. And she would take my mouth up, put me in a corner for talking a lot. But I was never afraid of her. And I don't think I was ever afraid of anybody. But I remember her calling me to the front of the class. And when she called me to the front of the class, it meant usually that my mouth would be taped up. But this time she said, you see, Cindy, she's one of the best writers in this class. Cindy, read what you wrote. So here it was, number one, the same teacher that, taped my mouth up also identified me as being a good writer. Now, these were things that were hidden in me and hidden from me. And a lot of things that are hidden from you are also hidden in you. And so I remember sitting with my guidance counselor, and she said, Cindy, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I really don't know right now. All I know is I need a lot of secretaries to help me. And today I have a lot of employees, but back in the days, I thought a boss always had a secretary. But now I have COOs, CFOs. I have a lot of people helping me. So there were indicators. And what I had to do is to silence the voice of people around me and silence even my restrictive thoughts of what I can do, because there was no money in the house for me to go to university. That's number one. But I wanted to go, and I didn't know where those thoughts came from, but all I know I was going to go. but I had to work extra harder. I had to put the work in. And I had to work extra harder than the average person that had both parents. And I was prepared to put the work in. And then the third thing was I had to sit down with myself and actually write a vision. And back in the day, there was no books about how to write a vision. So I wrote my first vision 25 years ago, and that's why that question is interesting. 25 years ago, because I read you need a vision for your life. Nobody told me how to write it. And I sat down and I wrote a vision in 12 areas. And someone asked me a couple of years ago, Dr. Trimm, how do you write a vision? What's the secret to your success? And I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. And that book was Hello Tomorrow. So yes, to answer that question, I did kind of know. I didn't always have the articulation. And then secondly, my journey is filled with twists and turns. And I think the key thing is that whenever you come to a crisis moment and a very challenging time, and I've had many, those times become your defining moment. And they're not meant to create duress. They're meant to put enough pressure on you for you to maximize your potential in that moment and make a decision. So I always made a decision to press past a point of comfort because I understand in hindsight, just wisdom, that successful people are just getting started where failures give up. So you know, I did a lot of things that were not popular. When I went into politics to run my company, or to run my country at that time, I was still in my late 20s then. And I counseled with some Christians, and they said, Cindy, politics is dirty. Why would you go into politics when you've got a great platform as a preacher? And I said, politics is not dirty. People are dirty. And if we're going to clean up politics, we need clean people. And so your decisions are not always going to be popular. They're not always going to be supported by people that love you. And these are people that love me. And here's the caveat, Dr. Pozu. The caveat is this, that the people that are closest to you are the greatest threat to your future. And I tell you why. Your enemies, you know who your enemies are. But the people that are close to you don't want you to be hurt. They want you to succeed. And because they play it safe, they want you to play it safe. But you've got to understand that playing it safe will never bring about success. It's taking risk. And the people closest to you love you enough. And I can give you a biblical principle of that. And that's Peter with Jesus. Jesus said, I'm going to have to be crucified. And he said, you don't have to go that route. And Jesus turned around to Peter and rebuked him and said, you know not what spirit you are speaking of or what spirit is driving you. So you look at Samuel's life. When Samuel came to his parents and he said, I want to marry this woman. And they said, why don't you marry your kind? And that's because they did not discern that was a prompting that God put in that was a prompting that God put in Samson's life. But their parents did not discern that thought and idea actually came from God. So our greatest challenge is not with Goliath, like David, like Samson, like Joseph. Our greatest challenge is with the people that love us, because they don't want us to be hurt.
All right. Powerful. Okay, I think this came from a medical doctor, and this is what he's asking. He said, just listening to some of your podcasts, for example, on healing, where you speak specifically to parts of the body using medical terms. How are you able to operate in the prophetic on a deep level and combine that with practical insights?
Beautiful, beautiful question. The thing about Revelation is this, that it's the deep things, and the Bible calls it the mysteries of the kingdom. So a mystery means that it's very complex. So being able to take complex mysteries and make it practical is what I'm gifted in. And so on the day of Pentecost, the Bible said every man heard in his own language. So that means that in every discipline, in every industry, people understand the language of that industry. So I take and I study about 8 hours a day every single day. And I study different disciplines so that the revelation that God gives me and the mysteries of the kingdom make sense based on the context of a person's discipline, so that when they walk away from a lecture or a sermon that I'm preaching or a prayer that I'm praying, every man could hear it in their language and understand it, and then take the revelation and practically apply it to their spheres of influence and the field that they're in. And that's the gift that I bring to humanity, to be able to take very complex revelation and complex subject matter and make it as practical as I possibly can. How I understand things that are around me, I understand them scientifically and philosophically. That's how I understand. That's how I process. And because I process it that way, it's easy for me to articulate it in a way and that the average person can answer. And take the COVID-19. The COVID-19 is complex. It's not just about the impact that it's having socially and spiritually, and in industry specifically, but it's also the impact that it's having technologically and educationally and economically. So how do I address something as complex as COVID-19? I cannot just speak about it from one dimension. I have to be able to see big picture and then place it in the proper context. And that takes discipline. I'm being interviewed every single day, Dr. Poju, every single day, on different platforms and in different countries: South Africa, Nigeria, Bermuda, England, United States of America, all different platforms, Christian, secular. And to be able to speak and to have the opportunity, I have to be broad in my thinking. I cannot just restrict what I'm hearing to one platform. And I have to discipline myself, because to whom much is given, much is required. And so that's a long way in answering the question. But to have a greater understanding, it simply means that I have to have a greater discipline, so that as I'm praying, it's not just significant, but it's relevant.
All right, let me just ask you this off the cuff. This COVID-19, I mean, a lot of people, either out of fear, but a lot of people are speaking about permanent changes, like it's going to change everything about the way we live and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in the past, I mean, they've had pandemics they've had the Spanish flu. Everybody returned back to some sort of normalcy. Nobody was wearing masks. Nobody. So are we overplaying this thing, or is this, do you think this is going to be, the beginning of education online and the beginning of, because people are saying many things.
Everything is going to change. Any global crisis that reaches an inflection point like this, and you can look back in history, from leprosy straight down to HIV, you can see how that changed how we live. And how we live is going to change. It will never return to the world that we were born in. And let me say this unequivocally. The world into which we were born no longer exists. And we've reached an inflection point. And it's a critical conversation that we have to have on all levels, because a lot of people is running afraid of 5G. You can hear a lot of conversation, conspiracy theories that are there. And again, giving you the example of Mary, John, and Peter, about perspective. Everyone's taking the truth, and they're trying to figure out our way forward. I say, to people, do not knee jerk. The world will never be the same. And people are talking about AI and technology. Yes, there are professions that will be made obsolete, but for every one job that we lose, 2.5 jobs are going to be created. So the issue is not whether jobs are going to be obsolete, we're going to change the way that we live. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you going to have the skill for the new? And we should be talking about what skill is going to be necessary. And I want to go back to Joseph's dream. He had two dreams, and God showed him that there was going to be a major economic shift. And that particular shift where the world went into a global crisis, there was a drought. That means every industry was affected. And when they recovered, it took 14 years of recovery. And or 7 years, it was 7 years of blessings and then 7 years where they were in a drought. During those 7 years, this is where you have Egypt, that was once a part of Mesopotamia, rise up to become the superpower, one of the first superpower nations that we know about. United States of America is the superpower today. But it was one of the first superpowers, and it means that Joseph's dream meant that he was looking at a shift in industry. And in his dream, he saw himself as one of the industry leaders, and he saw his brothers. And one was about the wheat, and another was about the stars. These are the interpretations of the dream. So one had to do with the first economic shift, which would take the world from being agrarian or cattle, driven by cattle, to driven by the agrarian. And then moving from agrarian to where we are right now, moving up to the sky, 5G. That's a shift, where he saw all the stars. And he saw his brothers leading, because in the dream, they all had these stalks that they had wrapped. But their stalks bowed to the stalk of Joseph, meaning someone has to be a leader. Someone has to have the agenda. And then the second one, they saw the world leaders, and it couldn't have been his father and mother. It had to be Pharaoh and his wife. So 57 nations was affected by that critical moment of change, where the world would never be the same. And I can continue on with laying a argument and a rationale to what I'm about to say. And what I'm about to say is this, that the world will never be the same. And we talk about new normal. This is normal. And where we're going to be will be normal. Because we've always been attacked by pandemic, pestilence. If my people which are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from the wicked ways. He said, I will heal their land. And the Bible talks about pestilence and disease, and this is nothing new. But what is new is our approach. And if God said, I remember the scripture that God gave you, and it was about new in January, and I remember saying to you, only God could have given you this, doctor, and how humbled I was to join with you. New means new. It means innovation. And we have, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution brought us digital technology, where we went from analog to where we are right now, digital. So that means that we have the greatest opportunity to step forward with innovation. And the greatest innovation is God himself. And we have the Word, which is Jesus Christ. The Word created the earth. And God gave it to us. He bequeathed it, and we're stewards. So inasmuch as we see death, one of the greatest killer or one of the greatest contribution to man's mortality is heart disease. But the second is lower respiratory. So COVID-19 is a lower respiratory. But lower respiratory, it's a virus. And I have to correct myself, we should not call it a disease. It's a virus. It's not a disease. It's a virus that impacts the lower respiratory. But we were already there with lower respiratory being the second highest killer of humanity. So what we're doing right now, we're being sequestered and we're being quarantined. But I believe that God is wheeling us into heaven's delivery room. And there we have to push. We're pushing in prayer, yes. But also we should be having conversations. We should be, as a body of believer, we should be able to sit and say, who is amongst us, and begin to train the minds and to begin to raise up industry leaders and to do a census, a kind of census, and begin to speak about post-COVID-19. It is going to come to an end, but when it comes to an end, will you be ready for the emerging technology, the emerging industry, the emerging jobs, and who are the emerging leaders? So going back to Joseph, he had a dream. My question is, who are the dreamers? Where are the dreamers? Where are the innovators? And if you're out there, God is speaking to you. And this is the greatest hour. Our pain points should be prayer points that point us to our assignment, that gives rise to purpose being expressed. And this is my take on COVID-19.
All right. So you've answered the question I was going to ask on prayer, what we should be praying. We should focus our prayers on our assignments during this time.
Yes.
Instead of just removing the virus, but to discover our assignment.
Yeah.
So just one last question.
Yes.
COVID-19 has global implications, this person says, for different sectors. And the church also was not spared, which means it affected churches and all of that. Now, she says at WAFBEC 2020, you alluded, that's when you were with us, you alluded to the birth of cyber cities by 2030, the Internet of Things. With the current situation, all right, which you started sharing, she asked, can you just share your thoughts about all of this?
Wow. That's going to take another conversation.
Yeah.
But just to talk about it, the world is moving. And it's moving ahead at quantum speed. The Internet of Things, 5G. That introduces 5G. Many things that are developing are going to be pushed even faster. And so when we talk about technology, let's just put it in its context. We're talking about nanotech, neurotech, which impacts. Nanotech is impacting what we do. Neurotech is impacting what we do with human beings, what we're doing in medicine. You have digital tech. FinTech is going to be huge. That means that we should look to see currency being changed from something that is physical to something that is electronic. It's going to happen. How we buy is going to change. We talk about smart cars. We're going to have smart surfaces. How we do life is going to be changed by technology. And we are in the fourth industrial revolution. It's Industry 4.0, started in 2015. So it's nothing to be afraid of. So I say that there should be no fear campaign. There should be an aware campaign. So going back as in the days of Noah, there's a reset button that has been hit globally. And it's given us an opportunity to rethink how we do life. And one of the biggest things that is going to be front and center stage is going to be, what does it mean to be human? Because we live in a virtual world now, but it's going to be augmented. And augmented reality simply means that you're going to use technology so that people feel, so that people experience like we experience five physical senses. Is going to be augmented with glasses. And you're going to live in a virtual world. You're going to be able to live in a virtual world. If you look at Ready Player One, Elysium, the Minority Report, all of these movies is pointing towards where we're going to be living and how we're going to be living. The issue is we don't need to fear. We've had technological advancements since the beginning of mankind. In the building of the temple, God gave Moses a blueprint, but he had to employ the services of Bezalel and Eliab. And God said he put in their hearts the skill and the ability to know how to work in materials and metal and how to use these materials. What they were doing, they were innovating. And God used Bezalel to innovate. You have Joseph, that was an economic engineer. You have so many people in the Bible that were used in terms of medicine. You have Elijah. When we talk about aquaponics, here you have Elijah. There was bacteria in the water supply that was killing people, and God was able to use him with aquaponics, which is biotech and water technology. And he was able to throw something in the waters and heal the water. So we look in the Bible, the language is spoken based on the context of the history and the generation and the culture that they were living in their time. But they were doing the same things we are doing, but differently. You look at biotech. The first biotechnologist was Jacob, when he took the sheep and he spliced the genes so that he produced one sheep that was spotted and speckled, right, and the other ones were either black or white. That's biotech. So just because we have a different language doesn't mean that things are changed. When language adjusts, it's proof that we have progressed. So if we're talking about the same thing in church, we have not progressed at all. Language dictates. When God wanted to change the world, he sent language. He sent the word. We don't need to come to church to be healed. God will send the word and heal them. The centurion said, "Send the word, and my servant shall be healed." So there's no off limits to prayer. There's no industry. There's no place in this world, no government, no industry that's off limits to the word of God. There's no industry, no person that's off limits to prayer. So even as we are using virtual, that means that we could propagate the message of the kingdom to a larger number of people. And the question is, are we ready for the influx? Because they're going to come. And in the days to come, and I'm building a case for the church to prepare, in the days to come, because everything is going to be augmented, and because viruses and bacteria are going to be on the increase, they are. Medical intervention is going to fail us, but divine intervention will never fail us. And I'm building a case for faith and hope and what we have. And what we have is the supernatural. So the natural is going to fail us, but the supernatural will never fail us. With man, things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible.
Thank you, Doctor. Wonderful conversation. Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. You've been really busy. Thank you so much. I mean, you just feel, I watched you right up to almost 25 minutes before this, speaking with Dr. Les Brown, and I was watching. I hope she finished on time. What about our service? And you're right here from another platform, and you moved right here. We really appreciate this. We are really thankful.
Thank you, Dr. Pujo. What you're doing for the body of Christ, you're one of the kingdom's best. And I want to personally thank you for the last 2 years to be a part of the unfolding of God's plan, not just for the body of Christ, but for Africa. And as we move into the next expression of our human experience here on this earth, I want to really encourage Nigeria and Nigerians. It has the strongest economy in all of Africa. Nigerians are some of the brightest and the smartest, and I say this because I understand why Nigeria. If you go throughout the United States of America, some of the best and the brightest are Nigerians. If you go to England, Europe, anywhere in the world, some of the best and the brightest medicine practitioner that are in the medical profession are Nigerians. And I believe that as we are talking about 5G and transportation and everything that's going on, Nigeria has the opportunity to lead in technology. I've already carved out some places from Abuja becoming the London of Nigeria, to Warri, to becoming the Silicon Valley of Nigeria. And I've already carved out these spaces. I've done a lot of research, a lot of study, and I would love to weigh in with your government in plotting and planning and engineering the way forth for Nigeria. I believe that I've done it in the past with my government, and I believe that a part of my assignment is to use my gifts and talents for Nigerian. And people ask me all the time, why do you love Nigeria so much? I believe that when my foreparents were carried over to the United States of America, they had to be Nigeria. I'm as assertive as Nigerians are. And I don't call Nigerians aggressive. I do call them assertive. And I identify with Nigeria, and it would be an honor if your government would give me a green passport. When I come across, and I pass the immigration, they always say you are Nigerian, and I say I'm not. Well, your mother was. I say she wasn't. Your daddy, I wasn't. And I always say to them, if you give me a passport, I promise you I'll be the best Nigerian you have ever seen. God bless this world. God bless America. God bless our